I like tight ends.
The Houston Texans introducing the new offensive coordinator, Nick Caley. Here are the 4 things that stood out the most to me from what head coach DeMeco Ryans and new offensive coordinator Nick Caley had to say. Now, Caley was my top choice throughout the process, and maybe before Bobby Slowick got the pink slip for the Houston Texans, coming over from Sean McVay's staff in LA to be the offensive coordinator for the Houston Texans. And so I was curious about hearing from DeMeco Ryans about the process. How exactly did DeMeco Ryans go through and land on Nick Caley as his offensive coordinator?
Yeah, I talked to a lot of great people throughout this process, and just it was clear as I kept going through it, talking to people and going through my process, it was very clear that Nick was the right guy for our team. Just with his energy, right, his leadership ability. I think with him being able to understand the run game, pass game, with him being in multiple schemes that were successful, understanding how to tailor the offense to the players that we have, that led me to Nick. And I feel really strong in my conviction that he can lead us and get us over the hump. Right? We've had a lot of good success these first 2 years, and the reason for doing it is I think there's another level that we can go to. And so I said earlier, it's my job to take this organization to new heights, and I think hiring Nick will help us to get there.
Now, a few things there that DeMeco Ryans mentioned that, well, it's not a huge surprise, but Nick Caley coached a variety of different position groups before he ended up as the Texans offensive coordinator. Bobby Slowick didn't. Nick Caley coached under some different coaches and some different systems before he ended up as the offensive coordinator for the Houston Texans. Bobby Slowick didn't. So those are 2 things that are important and were important in the process, but the resumes tell you that. You can look at the resume and see that. How does Nick Caley differ from Bobby Slowick when they're both guys that coached on the West Coast recently, coached under highly thought of offensive minds, and will be first-time play callers? Well, not only are those couple of things from the resume, the different systems that he's coached under, as well as the position group that he's coached, but DeMeco Ryans brought up the leadership comment a couple of times. Leadership is important. Having to lead a room, a tight end room, fullbacks at a previous point for Nick Caley. He was a secondary coach in college at one point. Having to lead a room and a position group, that hopefully gives him a better base to work off of and getting the entire offense to follow him. That's what you need from a leader. You need to convince people to follow him. And another thing I loved from that comment is, well, DeMeco Ryans knows the charge is very clear. We are close to going where we want to go. The offense held us back. The offense needs to be there with the defense to take the Texans where they have never gone before. That's the charge for Nick Caley. No small feat, but it is exactly what his job description is going to be going forward. Now let's hear from the new offensive coordinator, Nick Caley. What type of offense are you going to run? You've coached under Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels in New England. You've coached under Sean McVay in LA. What kind of offense are you going to run? Break it down for us in layman's terms.
It's going to be Houston's. It's going to be our scheme based on what we do, and I don't say that to throw any curveballs. It really is. I mean, my history dating back to when I first got into the National Football League under Coach Belichick is we were going to be a game plan team. If that meant we were going to run duo and gap schemes and run the ball 45 times to win the game, then that's what we were going to do. If we had to run more perimeter plays, wide zone, and we felt that was going to give us the edge, we were going to do that. It was all going to be based. We were going to ask our guys to do what they do well, but it was going to be based on what we do to help us win. And at the end of the day, we want to win, and that's priority for us.
Now, I like this answer, but I didn't love this answer, but I like this answer for the future of the offense. Look, figuring out what everybody is good at, figuring out what guys can't do, keeping them from doing that, that's super important in an offense. It felt a lot of times like Bobby Slowick took the playbook from San Francisco, copied it, made a couple of changes, and then just tried to fit everything that the Texans had into that system, into that situation. And he constantly asked players to do things that they were not good at doing. He constantly asked Dalton Schultz to block. Dalton Schultz, not a good blocker. You've got to be able to limit exposure to things that players can't do well. You got to maximize what they can do well. And it's all nice and easy to say, hey, it's going to be a game plan offense. We're going to do what our players do well. Well, the Texans got two good players on offense right now outside of the quarterback spot. They've got Nico Collins and they've got Joe Mixon. And it's nice to say, hey, we're going to maximize what we have. The Texans don't have a lot. So that's when you've got to maximize the abilities of maybe lesser players. You're going to have 3, 4, 5 wide receivers on this team that aren't anywhere close to Nico Collins' ability. You're going to have moments where you can't give the ball to Joe Mixon. You're going to have to throw the ball to the tight end room, which is a bit of a question mark right now. How can you maximize, put those lesser talented players in positions to succeed, evolve around the challenges that your roster creates? Bobby Slowick didn't evolve. The defenses of the NFL were ready for him, and the Texans offense suffered. Nick Caley's charge. Hey, you've got to be able to evolve, change things, even within a game. Remember how many second halves there were no adjustments? Nick Caley's got to be able to make those adjustments, change as needed, even over the course of the season. No more, we're close in week 12, week 13 of the season, like Bobby Slowick said last year. You got to be able to get there each and every week. No easy task for Nick Caley. And certainly not easy when you've got to deal with this offensive line that the Texans have. Look, I know a lot of us want to see change on this offensive line. It's not super realistic to see wholesale changes on this offensive line. Every significant offensive lineman who played significant snaps last year is under contract still. Kendrick Green, the one player that is headed to free agency, but everybody else is under contract on this offensive line. And while I'd love to see a couple of new faces and a couple of new spots along that offensive line, it's not super realistic. So it may just be make do for Nick Caley here in 2025 to an extent. I do believe they could make an adjustment, a change at that right guard spot pretty easy. Move on from Shaq Mason, bring in a different veteran to lock that spot down. But I still believe that some combination of Laramie Tunsil, Blake Fisher, and Titus Howard will be your tackles. If Howard's not outside at tackle, I believe he's going to be at left guard. And I still think Juice Scruggs and Jared Patterson are going to be battling it out for that center spot. That leaves right guard, hopefully with a veteran investment. And then you got to go find some depth pieces as well. Hey, Nick Caley, how does your offense go about making sure that CJ Stroud is protected?
With the offensive line, the quarterback, obviously the halfback, you got to be able to see the game through the same set of eyes, and you got to be going in the same direction, and you got to be tied together. And it starts with communication, and it starts with protecting inside out and establishing a pocket, the depth of the pocket, the width of the pocket, and that extends obviously into the tight ends, receivers when you're chipping and stuff like that. But it does. It really starts inside out, and it starts seeing it through the same lens, and we all got to be coordinated in that.
Inside out, which makes me feel like Nick Caley has pretty good confidence in the tackle situation for the Texans. If it was a disaster, then you'd have to worry about making sure that the tackles don't ruin things. But the interior offensive line is where the Texans were at their worst last year. The left guard play prior to Titus Howard was awful from Kenyon Green and not good from Juice Scruggs. Kendrick Green got a little opportunity there. The right guard play from Shaq Mason, not good enough. They ended up going to Jarrett Patterson at center, and Scruggs never reclaimed that spot once he was healthy. They've got to be better on the interior. And Nick Caley also mentioned that he's going to have protections, rules that the team needs to be aware of and needs to communicate about to make sure that guys aren't just mysteriously lost on the field out there like they have been in the recent season for the Houston Texans. Remember how many times guys just didn't know who to block and some free rusher came by and nearly killed CJ Stroud? Yeah, I remember it all too well. All too well. Okay. Finally, with Nick Caley, I love a little trip down memory lane. What did you learn from your previous two bosses, Bill Belichick and Sean McVay?
Going back in my time in New England, embracing your role, keeping your head down, working hard, and really the more you can do, the more value you have, and just there's no detail that's I would say too small. You turn over every rock. You try to find a way to give yourself an edge as a team through your players, through coaching, etc. And I would say thoroughness, attention to detail, accountability. That's what really stands to mind with Coach Belichick. Sean, same thing, just the energy, the passion, the leadership. Obviously, both men are incredible football coaches, but you talk about the way he goes about the day in LA, the way he moves, the way he communicates, the way he invests, the way he pours into players. Those are just a few things about both those coaches that I've obviously taken along the way.
Where a coach has come from is super important to me. Who he's coached under is pretty important to me. And having coached under Bill Belichick and Sean McVay, pretty successful coaches there. Obviously learning offense a lot more from McVay, and then just kind of learning the operation of the organization from Belichick at the back end of his time with the Patriots tenure. And look, you're going to have to be detail-oriented. You're going to have to be heavily focused. But from Belichick, I do wonder just how much will you put up with if you're Nick Caley? If a guy can't do this, if a guy can't get it done, how much will you put up with? Will you put a guy like Titus Howard on the bench, or Shaq Mason, if he's still around, on the bench? Or will Dalton Schultz get a seat if it's not working? I feel like Belichick never would have hesitated to bench somebody if they weren't performing. And then with McVay, part of McVay is evolution, because he had to change who he was and how he operated after the Super Bowl loss, ironically, to Bill Belichick, and the changing and evolving that is necessary from a coach, not only on a season-to-season basis, but a week-to-week basis. And think about the Rams, some of the challenges they faced in 2024 with their offensive linemen being injured. Both their star wide receivers were hurt at different times, and they somehow found a way to cobble it all together and find themselves in the playoffs. It's a really impressive performance by Sean McVay and his crew. It's an impressive organization. Caley's obviously been a part of it. What did you steal from Sean McVay? And of course, the offense, from McVay. Got to see some wide receivers and some motion, some movement. That's what I really like out of the press conference for a Nick Caley. 4 things. DeMeco Ryans with the process. Nick Caley on what type of offense. Nick Caley on protecting CJ Stroud. And what'd you learn from how you got here, Nick Caley? What did you like from the press conference? Let me know in the comment section down below. On your way down there, throw me a thumbs up on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Subscribe to SNL, where I do my work with Landry Locker from the Locker Room. Appreciate you watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I can't wait until we talk Texans again soon. Oh, and don't forget, it's Valentine's Day tomorrow. Don't forget. It might be a corporate holiday, but it's important to some people. Don't forget.
I like tight ends.